This is In the Breach podcast, where we answer, how should young Catholic creatives live in the modern world? Today we're going to find out by reading the book of Nehemiah.
Deal.
Actually, we're not reading the whole book, but we're going to read part of the book.
We're going to tell you about the book of Nehemiah.
Well, I'm going to tell you about it.
Grab a stool. Sit down right here.
He hasn't even read the book of Nehemiah.
I grabbed a chair, but there's a stool over it.
Okay, story time. It all started in 586 BC with the Babylon Empire destroying the temple. This is like hundreds of years before Nehemiah. So, all right, so let me paint the picture. People of Israel are living in Jerusalem. Babylon comes by, obliterates the temple. They get exiled for like 40 years. Then Babylon's like the big country of the time. There's this nomad tribe of like camel warriors in the desert on the border of Babylon and I think it's the Median Empire. So that was like a smaller empire. And they might have been connected to Babylon, I'm not sure. But these desert camel warriors, one of them is named Cyrus. And he assembles his band and they strike so quickly and they're so mobile that when they rebel against the Median rulers, they don't have the ability to respond fast enough. And this guy topples the entire empire with his desert rabble and becomes the king of that country, which is now Iran. And
Dang.
Babylon is right around where Iraq is.
Crazy times.
Yeah. So then he's not done. Then he conquers Babylon, who had all of the Jewish people in exile. And he was a pioneer because he didn't murder everyone that he conquered. So when he took over a place, he would allow them to practice their own religion. And he showed compassion. And so the big problem with a lot of the warlords and empires of the time was that when they took over, they would impose their ideology. And so they'd have a lot of rebellions. And because of travel was really slow on horseback and camelback, if you have a rebellion on the east border of your kingdom and a rebellion on the west border of your kingdom at the same time, you had to pick one to put down, right? But he had a low rate of rebellion because he was so compassionate. And so what he did when he took over Babylon was he let all the Jewish people who wanted to go back to Jerusalem, the country that they were ripped out of, right? So that was in 538. In his first year as king. His name is King Cyrus the Great, by the way, because he was the first guy who figured out that if you kill everyone, then they don't like you.
Wow. Smart guy.
Yeah. So in 538, they come back. Then a few years later, they start building the temple again, Solomon's temple. But the work pauses. And then 16 years later, King Darius II, this is in 520. King Darius is like, I think he's the grandson of Cyrus the Great. And he ends up being like a really successful warlord too. But he allows the prophets during his reign, the prophets Haggai and Zechariah convince all the Israelites to keep building the temple because when they came back into the land, there was the Samaritans, right? And that's like where the Jewish-Samaritan feud came from. The Samaritans were basically given Jerusalem, and then the Jewish people came back, and they're like, hey, we actually lived here first. But the Samaritans have been living there for years, over 40 years. So then 20 years after the temple building starts is when it's completed. And then they don't really live the way that they're supposed to. They don't really have the right worship. And 60 years after it's completed, they basically haven't really established the correct way of living, and they're struggling. And so, and then because they spent so many years in exile, there's a bunch of Jewish people who stayed behind, right? And so there's a second wave of Jewish people 60 years later who show up with this guy named Ezra, and he basically convinces them like, okay, you built the temple, but that's not everything. You still have to live differently. And so he tries to introduce reforms, but the problem is that Jerusalem is basically a trashed city. The walls are totally broken down, and the gates are burned. And anything that Ezra tries to do to establish like a culture of people who will live differently is destroyed by all of these powerful people all around Jerusalem who use the city basically to gain wealth and to trade, and they profit off of degrading the Jewish people's way of life, basically intermarriage, getting them to sacrifice to their gods and think the way that they think, right? And so Ezra's problem for 13 years, he's trying to make convince the Jewish people to live separately, but because there's no wall, Jerusalem doesn't even feel like a real city, right? People are just going in and out. And so you can imagine how, well, okay, so remember there's still Jewish people living in, actually, not Babylon anymore. Cyrus the Great his capital was Susa. And so there was a Jewish man living in Susa who was the king's cupbearer. This was King Artaxerxes. He's like way down the family tree. Cyrus is dead like 100 years ago. And the cupbearer is like one of the most trusted positions in the king's court.
Right.
Which means he was a rich guy. And he must have, his ancestors must have gained the trust of the ruling kings over the course of like hundreds of years. But there was something tugging at his heart, obviously, because while that second wave that comes with Ezra, his brother's probably most likely in it. And so this guy, Nehemiah, this rich guy, must have decided when Ezra was leading that wave to stay, right? Maybe he legally couldn't leave. Maybe the king wouldn't have allowed it, right? But his family did. And so he's thinking about the city of his people. And then one day, his brother comes and sends a message to him that basically giving him an update on the state of his city, like his hometown, that he's never seen. That the walls are broken down, and that, the Jewish people aren't being faithful, and that the provinces around the Samaritans and the Arabs and everyone are just coming in and completely diluting the culture that they were supposed to be living, right? And that hits him really hard. I don't know, maybe he was thinking that, like, maybe his heart was already torn like 13 years ago when that wave went and his family left to go back to Jerusalem, and he was thinking like, I should go with them, but I have to stay here with the king. Or maybe he was like, nah, I got it too good here, right? But when he heard about how terrible his city was going, he mourned and he fasted for days. But he didn't let the king who was serving know. And then one day, like I think a few months later, he's in the king's court and he's serving him wine, and he like can't keep it in, and the king is like, dude, why are you so sad? You're usually like a happy guy. And then he explains to him basically that his ancestors' city is being ravaged. And the king is like, King Artaxerxes is like, do you want to go fix it? And then he was like, well, it says that he prayed. And then after praying, he says, okay, I'll go. And then he asked for letters so that the governors of the towns nearby don't like kill him for walking in and saying that things are going to be different. So he packs up his whole family and leaves on horseback, goes to Jerusalem. And then when he gets there, he doesn't tell anyone what he's doing. He goes out, he just arrives and people are like, hey, what's up? And then at night he goes and he spies out the wall and he goes around the whole city and he figures out all the work that needs to be done. I'm not exactly sure why he did that, except maybe to keep people from like trying to oppose him before he knew what he needed to do. The next day he calls together all of the Jewish leadership and the people. And he says, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem so that we may no longer suffer disgrace. He says, I told them that the hand of my God had been gracious upon me, and also the words that the king had spoken to me. Then they said, let us start building. So they committed themselves to the common good. But when Sanballat the Haranite and Tobiah the Ammonite official and Geshem the Arab heard of it, they mocked and ridiculed us, saying, who is this? What is this that you are doing? Are you rebelling against the king? Then I replied to them, the God of heaven is the one who will give us success, and we, his servants, are going to start building. But you have no share or claim or historic right in Jerusalem. So these three guys, Sanballat, I'm probably mispronouncing it, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab. Sanballat is the governor of Samaria, which is like basically the original Jewish country. It's almost all of it except for Jerusalem. He's ruling over all of that. And then Tobiah is an Ammonite, and that's like another people that's nearby. And then Geshem the Arab. So they're surrounded on all sides by these governors who are like legitimately powerful people in the region, effectively kings, right? Regional kings. So when they like go to oppose him, it's not like just some random guy with fancy clothes in the crowd. It's people with standing armies who are the usual voices in the town who are telling the Jews what's going on, right? So his like decision to insult them was something that they'd never probably experienced before in their life, right? So then, starting with the priests, the Jewish people began to build. And every family, basically, who was near the wall started building the wall in front of their own house, but they also were building the walls in front of other people's houses, right? And it basically made everybody outside of Jerusalem angry, because all of a sudden the people that were a source of their financial gain and the people that they could push around, right, had this funny idea that they could build a wall and not have to submit to them anymore. So Sanballat, the governor of Samaria, it says he got angry, and then he said in the presence of his associates and of the army of Samaria, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore things? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish it in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish, and burned ones at that? Then his buddy Tobiah the Ammonite says, who was beside him said, that stone wall they're building, any fox going up on it would break it down. And then the next line is, so we rebuilt the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. So within a few days, they were like halfway done. The whole wall, right? And so they just didn't listen to people who were making fun of them, basically.
Right.
even if those people had armies and might kill them. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem was going forward and the gaps were beginning to be closed, they were very angry, and all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. So we prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. The strength of the burden bearers is failing, and there is too much rubbish, so that we are unable to work on the wall. That's what they said. And our enemies said, they will not know or see anything before we come upon them and kill them and stop the work. When the Jews who lived near them came, they said to us 10 times, from all the places where they live, they will come up against us. Some of the lowest parts of the spaces behind the wall and in open places, I stationed the people according to their families, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. After I looked these things over, I stood up and said to the nobles and the officials and the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your kins, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. So that all 3 of those kingdoms around Jerusalem were planning to just invade the city and kill everyone who was working on the wall. When our enemies heard that their plot was known to us and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to his work. From that day on, half of my servants worked on construction, and half held the spears, shields, bows, and body armor. And the leaders posted themselves behind the whole house of Judah, who were building the wall. The burden bearers carried their loads in such a way that each labored on the work with one hand, and with the other he built. The man who sounded the trumpet was beside me. And I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is great and widely spread out, and we are separated far from one another on the wall. Rally to us wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet. Our God will fight for us. So we labored at the work, and half of them held the spears from break of dawn until the stars came out. I also said to the people at that time, let every man and his servant pass the night inside Jerusalem, so that they may be on guard for us by night and may labor by day. So neither I nor my brethren, nor my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me ever took off our clothes. Each kept his weapon in his right hand. So when the enemies finally realized that Nehemiah, his band, had momentum and that they weren't going to stop the wall in an outright attack, they changed tactics and started attacking. They changed tactics from trying to attack the people to trying to attack the leaders. Now when it was reported to Sanballat and Tobiah and to Geshem the Arab and to the rest of our enemies that I had built the wall and there was no gap left in it, though up to that time I had not set up the doors and the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent to me saying, come, let us meet together in one of the villages in the plain of Ono. But they intended to do me harm. So I sent messengers to them saying, I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it to come down to you? They sent to me 4 times in this way, and I answered them in the same manner. I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. So they try to get on his good side. Basically, they are offering him an alliance to see if he will join them, be like them, because they're taking advantage of the people under them. So they ask him to come meet with them to let him into the rich guy club, basically, right? And he doesn't want to go because if he goes, he has to stop his mission, the real work he's there for. So then they try to use fear as leverage. In the same way, Sanballat sent his servant to me with an open letter in his hand, and it was written, it is reported among the nations, and Geshem also says it, that you and the Jews intend to rebel. That is why you're building the wall. And according to this report, you wish to become their king. You have also set up prophets to proclaim in Jerusalem concerning you, there is a king in Judah, and now it will be reported to the king according to these words. So come, therefore, and let us confer together. Then I sent to him, saying, No such things as you say have been done. You're inventing them out of your own mind. For they all wanted to frighten us, thinking, their hands will drop from the work, and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. So they threaten his reputation and try to pit the king against him. But he's not having it. One day when I went into the house of Shemaiah, son of Deliah, son of Mehetabel, who was confined to his house, he said, Let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. Indeed, tonight they are coming to kill you. But I said, Should a man like me run away? Would a man like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. Then I perceived and saw that God had not sent him at all, but he had pronounced the prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat, who had hired him. He was hired for this purpose, to intimidate me and make me sin by acting in this way, and so they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. So they basically gave up on even getting him to stop the work, and they just wanted him to do something embarrassing so that they could taunt him, because
That's like all social media warfare now. It's just do something stupid.
Yeah. Okay.
On camera, yes.
Do something stupid on camera?
Yeah.
Oh, so that people so that you get attention?
Yeah, it's like most of the, like if you have a social media opponent, I guess.
Like social media beef?
Clip something that they did and then spread it all over TikTok or whatever.
Right.
People see it and they're like, they laugh.
Right. So they're looking for TikTok material, basically.
Yeah.
Nehemiah ran into the temple.
Yeah.
Okay. Exactly. Okay. So it says that even after the work was completed, and by the way, when the work was completed, I think a few months later, Nehemiah goes back to Susa. He might be under contract, like he's got to get back under a certain time. But it says that even after the work was completed, for an undisclosed amount of time, Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem kept sending him letters of threats and stuff. So, yeah. Finally, okay. So here's the point of the story is that we have the book of Ezra, which is 13 years before, and then the book of Nehemiah, which is this story, this badass stand against social pressure, basically, because they never actually had to fight, but it was the fact that they were willing to fight that made it so that they could finish this work. So at the end of the book of Nehemiah, Ezra reappears, and then Nehemiah and Ezra bring out the book of the law and they read it to the people, and they celebrate the Feast of Booths, and the Jewish people are finally able to live in the way that they were instructed to live, because the wall that was built, it provided the safety and the space and the distance to where they could go into Jerusalem to worship. And even the Jewish people who lived outside, they'd come in to worship, and it was a source of strength, right? And then they could leave and go back to their farms and their families, right? So why this is important to Tektons, if you watch the short, we've made a symbolic connection between culture and the wall. Because if you think about it, the smallest city, the smallest civilization is the family. A mom, a dad, kids, right? And a family is a unit that exists in culture. It's that's like the water if they were a fish. It's what surrounds family, right? And that means that the first thing that's always in contact with the outside of the family is culture. And And it can be a wall if culture is set up well, if it's full of goodness, truth, and beauty, right? But if the culture is distorted, if it's lacking goodness, if it's lacking truth, if it's lacking beauty, then it's like you're up against wilderness, or like you have broken walls. And so any evil force or power can come through and manipulate families. And when you're a father trying to establish a city, a sanctuary city for your children to grow up in, for your wife, right? But your walls are broken down and culture is flooding through and doing whatever it wants through screens or through school. Like you send your kids to school and they're outside the walls, basically, right? But you can't just isolate from culture altogether. It's not an option. You have to live in the culture that you live in. You can choose how much of it you let into your household, but if you over shelter your kids when they go out, they won't be prepared for it, right? So the duty of a tekton, the mission, is to set up culture specifically around Catholics to strengthen our culture so that it's like a wall, so that we have goodness, truth, and beauty, and that even if we live outside the walls, even if we live in a difficult place, when we come to church, when we come to mass, when we live in Catholic community, when we interact with each other, it's a strengthening, protected, but not naive culture. Something that, like, you think you could make the most comfortable house ever, but if you don't have a strong door on it, you're not being realistic. Someone's going to come in and trash it, right? You can have the best city in the world with the temple of God at the center, right? But if you don't have a realistic understanding of what's outside and strong walls, then the outside is going to come in, and the outsiders don't understand the sacredness. They're not going to treat it the way it's made to be, right?
Or they do, and they will desecrate it on purpose.
Right. Like, so actually what happened with Babylon,
Right.
like 100 years later, was that Babylonian guy who got killed by Cyrus. He set up, or one of them set up oh no, that's actually later. Oh, we should do an episode on the Book of the Maccabees. The Greeks set up a statue of Zeus in the Holy of Holies in the temple.
Dang.
Yeah. So, the tekton symbol, we read about it just now. It is based off of the book of Nehemiah. We have 4 elements in the symbol. We have the horn, the cross, the hammer, the sword. Or the hammer and the horn, the burden and the blade. The burden being the cross. Because it says that the people who were carrying burdens carried so that they could hold a sword in one hand. And our burden is Christ, which is the cross, right? So every tekton must carry his cross with a sword in their hand. Meaning that whatever trial you're going to face, you're actively preparing to meet it. Whatever resistance you are going to have from what's actually evil, you are going to fight back.
So, do half of the tektons have the burden and the blade, and the other half have?
No, we had to be able to do all of them.
Okay.
So, at different times, like technically the sword symbolizes, well, there's like a lot of symbolism for each one,
Yeah.
right? So we're not saying like the sword is only like a warrior's attitude. The sword is also prayer, right?
Yeah.
Like that's essential. Actually, it's probably more prayer than it is anything else, right? So sword is prayer, burden is the cross. Everyone carries the cross. The hammer and the 5 minutes. Okay. The hammer and the horn are also specific things, not just they reference Nehemiah. Remember, they used the horn to sound where they wanted the forces to center, right? So that's leadership and communication. Obviously, we have to be epic at communicating. And then the hammer represents mastery because you can use it to build and you can use it to destroy. So mastery and leadership, right? Which are in the gods.
Yeah.
And then
which we all have.
They're down there on the floor.
I have mine over there.
I also have mine over there in your stack. And then we have the cross and the blade, which is Christ, the cross, suffering, discipline. And then when we play the video, the cross has fire on it. That looks really good.
Yeah.
And the fire represents the Holy Spirit. I just made that up. Oh, but the colors are red and white.
For one of them is mercy, and the other one is you know it. I forgot it.
Like the image of divine mercy.
Yeah.
White is mercy, and red is Christ's sacrifice, like his blood.
Yeah. Right.
Right. I think it might mean something else, but
I
like something deeper, like something. But the red is his blood, and the white is the water from his side. Right.
Right.
How much time do we have? Okay. All right. So we got to wrap this up basically. But so what do you think?
I mean, that's a pretty cool story to be based off of. I would say.
Yeah, I think so.
I would say that's up there with top tier lore. I would say. So if you're, you want to join something that's not cringe, come over here.
We're never cringe.
Especially me.
All right.